Post 1. Am I the jerk for letting a lawsuit break my family apart? I am the mother whose own daughter sued her over a miscarriage. And somehow I am still the one everyone expects to tiptoe around, even years later. For anyone confused, here is the short version so you are not guessing at the details. My oldest daughter, Hannah, was pregnant. My younger daughter, Maya, was home from her fancy kinesiology program and brought Hannah a box of safe herbal tea. Hannah drank it one evening in our living room. In the early hours of the morning, she woke up screaming, covered in blood. We lost the baby. Later, doctors started talking about gestational diabetes, poor control, risk factors, missed appointments. In that moment, none of that mattered to me. The only new thing that night, the thing my daughter herself whispered in shock, was, "She gave me that stuff." So when people asked what happened, I told them, our younger daughter pushed her wellness ideas too far, and our grandchild died. I told our family, I told people at church, I wrote to her school because I honestly believe someone who would introduce unapproved things into a pregnancy without proper oversight should not be anywhere near vulnerable patients. The university pulled her scholarship and placements. Maya left school, she stopped coming home. She says that we destroyed her life. I say we pulled a fire alarm when we saw smoke. Years later, Maya hired a lawyer and called it defamation. There were depositions and hearings and medical records dragged into the light. Eventually, to avoid a long, ugly trial, we signed a settlement. On paper, we agreed we were wrong to say that Maya's actions caused the miscarriage and that gestational diabetes and other complications were significant factors. We read a statement in church, posted it online, paid her a large sum, and signed a non-disparagement clause saying we would not claim she caused it again. Fine, the court got its piece. Maya got her money and her name cleared. I assumed life would go back to some version of normal. It did not. Hannah started therapy. She began using different language. She stopped repeating, "Everything was fine until the tea," and started saying it was more complicated, like she had swallowed a textbook. She reached out to Maya. They met for coffee. Then, very quietly, my girls started rebuilding something between them without me in the center of it. Meanwhile, my relationship with my granddaughter became conditional. Before all this, I was the primary babysitter. Teething, tantrums, last-minute daycare issues, I was the one they called. After the lawsuit and the statement, Hannah dialed that way back. At first it was, "We're busy," "She's got a schedule," "We're simplifying." Then it became, "I'd rather visits be at our place," and "We'll stay while you're here." Overnight visits stopped. Alone time stopped. When I pushed, Hannah said, "Mom, I need to know you won't talk about the miscarriage around her. She doesn't need to grow up hearing that story from you." From me, as if I am some neighborhood gossip and not her mother. So, yes, I have been resentful. I felt like I did what everyone demanded. Signed the papers, paid the money, read the script, and still ended up treated like a risk that needs managing. The only thing I had left was my private version of the truth. I kept it to myself, or so I thought. I still believe that tea mattered. I still believe my younger daughter's obsession with playing expert had consequences. And I still believe deep down that a judge's wording did not magically rewrite cause and effect in my living room that night. I have one small group of church friends who have stood by me. In that room, I let myself speak freely. I said things like, "We had to say we were wrong or we would have lost the house," and "They made me stand up and lie to protect her future." I told them that on paper, I have to stop saying Maya caused the miscarriage, but in my heart, I know my grandchild was taken from me by someone else's choices. I also started using anonymous forums, grandparent boards, family drama boards, places where you can vent without putting your real name. I posted about my younger daughter whose carelessness cost us a baby, who then sued us until we had to say we were wrong. I never used names. I never said the city. I changed small details. It felt safe. People online said all the things I needed to hear. "You're a strong grandma. You did what you had to for your daughter." I would never forgive the younger one either. I will be honest about something I have not admitted out loud. I liked it. I liked being the grandmother of a wrong child, the grandmother of a child whose life was stolen. It made my pain feel important. It made the whole awful story feel like more than just random tragedy. In those spaces, I was not the woman who had to read a retraction. I was the woman who had been forced to swallow her truth. I thought I was being careful, No names, no direct identifiers, just someone I trusted gave my pregnant daughter something and we lost the baby, then I was forced to sign papers. But not everything stays anonymous. People recognize patterns, screenshots travel, and some people apparently feel the need to help. Last week, I got another envelope from Maya's lawyer. Thick paper, same law firm. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. Inside was a letter accusing me of breaching the settlement. They quoted the non disparagement clause I had signed about not making any statements that suggested Maya caused the miscarriage or that our corrective statement was untrue. Then, stapled behind it were screenshots, my anonymous posts, my comments in a private church chat where I'd written, I only said I was wrong because the court forced me, but we all know who killed that baby. My real name attached in some of them because someone had taken them from a group where my actual profile shows. The letter said, very plainly, that if I did not stop immediately, issue a corrective note, and agree to consequences for the breach, they would ask the court to enforce the agreement. That could mean additional damages, legal costs, and actions against my assets. I called Hannah furious. She said she had seen the letter. She said she agreed with it. She said, Mom, you promised to stop. You signed. And you keep trying to find new audiences for a version of the story that hurts Maya and would eventually hurt my daughter. So now I am back in the position of being treated like a criminal for talking about my own grief. Except this time, my own daughters are fully united on the other side. Given all of that, am I the jerk for refusing to let a legal agreement gag me from saying what I truly believe happened? Even if that means I might have broken the settlement and could lose even more, including my home and what little access I have to my granddaughter? Update 1. The letter wasn't just knock it off, it was a nicely worded threat. Stop, pay, or we go back to court, and this time we go straight for enforcement. I took it to my lawyer that day. He read it carefully, page by page, then looked up at me with the same expression he'd had before the first settlement. Not shocked, not pleased, just resigned. This is not an idle warning, he said. They've brought receipts. The screenshots were stapled behind the letter. One from a private church group chat, my name and picture right there where I'd written, we all know why that baby isn't here, no matter what the statement said. Another from a grandparents' board under the anonymous handle I thought I'd hidden behind. I was forced to stand up and say I was wrong or lose my home, but I know my younger daughter's safety killed my grandchild. I wanted to argue about context. Those messages were written at midnight after seeing a new photo of Maya holding my granddaughter, or after a sermon about forgiveness that landed too close. None of that nuance appeared on the printed page, just the phrases. My lawyer tapped the non-disparagement clause from the original settlement. This is what you signed, he said. You will make no further statements suggesting Maya, last name, caused the miscarriage or intentionally endangered patients, and you will not state or imply that the corrective statement is untrue. I never used her full name, I protested. I didn't say the city. I didn't mention the school. A random stranger wouldn't know who I meant. He shook his head. The standard isn't, could someone in another country identify her? It's, could people who know you put it together? Clearly someone did. So because some busybody couldn't mind their own business, I'm in trouble again? I snapped. Because you violated what you signed, he corrected. Twice over. You reasserted that she caused the miscarriage, and you said the statement was forced and untrue. That is exactly what you promised not to do. I crossed my arms. We said what we had to say to get out of court, not because it was real. He gave me a long look. You are allowed to feel that way. You are not allowed to publish that feeling. The letter from Maya's lawyer set out two formal options. Option A, pay a contractual penalty, another significant sum, and sign an acknowledgement of breach with a tightened non-disparagement clause that would automatically trigger more penalties if I slipped again. Option B, go back to court on an enforcement motion. They'd ask the judge to impose sanctions, award them legal fees, and possibly authorize collection against my assets if I didn't pay. I asked which was better, he sighed. Cheaper short-term to pay, he said. Riskier long-term if you break the rules again. And frankly, they don't trust you not to. He hesitated. There is a third path they mention, informally. I frowned. Which is? He showed me a paragraph near the end. They were willing to recommend that most of the money be converted into a compliance plan if I agreed. In plain language, less money, more conditions. They're proposing, he said, that instead of trying to strip assets, they accept a much smaller payment plus 6 months of individual therapy and a set number of family sessions. It would be written into a court order. If you complete it and there are no more breaches, the matter closes. If not, they reserve the right to come back for full enforcement. So they want me to pay to be analyzed, I said. Sit with some stranger who will decide if I'm acceptable enough to keep my own home. Or, he said carefully, they're trying to avoid forcing a sale while still doing something to keep this from happening again? I already gave them assurance, I said. I stood up and read their statement. We paid. What more do they want? They want you to stop contradicting it, he said. You can't sign one version for the court and quietly sell another version everywhere else. The phrase play both sides was not written anywhere in that letter, but that is what it boiled down to, and it stung because it was accurate. In public, I had been the woman who did the right thing and chose peace. In private, with my tiny circle, I was still the crusading grandmother whose story had been censored. And I enjoyed that role. It made me feel larger than the quiet life I actually live. My lawyer asked, "Do you understand that if we go back to court and the judge believes you knowingly breached, he could come down a lot harder this time?" I thought of my house, not just the building, but my husband's chair, the photos on the walls, the kitchen table where I had rocked my granddaughter. The last thing that still felt truly mine. I'm not losing this house, I said. Not over a Facebook comment and a church chat. Then we need to decide, he said. Money alone or money plus therapy and tighter rules. Doing nothing is not an option. I drove home furious at everyone. Maya, her lawyer, the person who forwarded those screenshots, the judge, the entire system. On my kitchen table, the letter sat there like a second eviction notice. One emotional, one legal. Under all that noise, a smaller thought slid in that I did not like. You knew better. Not about herbs or ingredients, about the doctor's warnings, about the poor control notes, about the fact that I had heard more than once that things were not as fine as I wanted to believe, and yet I kept telling the same neat story anyway. And later, after signing that statement, I knew exactly what the gag clause meant. I just liked the feeling of being the wronged grandmother whose truth had been silenced. Admitting that made me feel sick. The next morning, I called my lawyer and said, "Ask them about the therapy option. I'm not selling my home." He said he would, that it would mean months of scrutiny and likely humiliation. I said, humiliation I can live with. Losing the house, I can't. Update 2, agreeing to explore the therapy option did not make anyone back off. It just moved the whole circus into a smaller room. My lawyer called the following week. They're willing to recommend converting most of the penalty, he said, but they want it written into a consent order. That means another appearance. Another day in front of the same judge, the same lawyers, my daughters sitting together on the other side of the aisle. The hearing was shorter this time. No witnesses, just paperwork. The judge flipped through the file for a while, then addressed me directly. "Mrs. Last Name," he said, "you recall agreeing to a non-disparagement clause in your settlement?" "Yes," I said. "And you understood it meant you were not to make statements suggesting Maya caused the miscarriage or that your corrective statement was untrue?" "I understood the words," I said. I did not think private conversations and anonymous posts counted the same way as a public accusation. Nina slid one of the printed posts forward. Handle, timestamp, the sentence about being forced to stand up and lie to save my house. "Nothing on the internet is anonymous anymore," the judge said. "And to your daughter, seeing you repeat these allegations in any form after settlement is understandably alarming." I hate that word. Alarming, like I'm a gas leak. Nina explained that they were not trying to bankrupt me. They wanted consequences that would actually change my behavior. She laid out their proposal, a reduced financial penalty plus 6 months of weekly individual counseling, at least 4 joint sessions as clinically appropriate, and written confirmation from the therapist that I had engaged in good faith. The phrase underlying behavior came up more than once. It made me feel like a case study rather than a person. My lawyer haggled over numbers and session counts. I watched my daughters. They were not triumphant. They were firm. There is a difference. We took a short recess. In the hallway, my girls spoke quietly together, not with me. It struck me, hard that they no longer needed me aligned with them to move forward. They had each other. I was the one whose access was conditional. Back in the courtroom, the judge read out the final terms: a reduced but still painful payment, the therapy plan, the family sessions, and a clarified order that any future breach could trigger sanctions without another long hearing. "You are entitled to your feelings," he said, looking straight at me. "You are not entitled to keep making public or semi-public factual claims that contradict the agreement you signed. This plan is an opportunity to protect both your finances and, potentially, your relationships. Take it seriously." I agreed. What else could I do? Argue with a man who can sign away my house? The first therapy session was exactly what I expected and worse. Small office, neutral art, a woman around my age with a notepad, and the practiced calm of someone who has heard every kind of story. She explained confidentiality, the limits, the fact that she would be sending brief progress notes to the court. That alone made me defensive. My pain turned into bullet points. Then she asked why I thought I was there. "Because my daughters and their lawyer found a way to punish me without emptying my bank account," I said. "That's one frame," she said. "Another is that your words have had serious impact, and this is a chance to look at why it's been so hard to stop repeating them." "Maybe because they're true," I said. She didn't flinch. "Let's start with what you know versus what you feel," she said. "You know there was gestational diabetes. You know there were missed appointments. You know the doctors warned about risks. You feel very strongly that the tea is what made it real for you." "The tea tipped it," I said. "That's what I believe." "Belief is not the same as proof," she said. "We're here to understand why you keep talking like they are identical." I rolled my eyes. In my head, I called the whole thing ridiculous. Out loud, I stayed just polite enough not to be reported as non-compliant. Near the end, she asked me something I didn't expect. "What do you get emotionally from telling the story the way you do?" she said. "From casting yourself as the grandmother of a wronged child, rather than a grandmother who lost a child to medical complications and bad luck?" I opened my mouth to say nothing. The real answers flashed through my head: attention, sympathy, moral high ground, purpose. "I don't know," I said instead. We both knew that was not quite honest. She didn't push further that day. "We'll keep coming back to that," she said. "And to what it's costing you to hold on to that version." I left angry. Of course I did. I told myself I was only doing this because of the house, that I could nod through 6 months, say whatever insightful sentences she wanted, and then I'd be free again. That night, I scrolled through support groups and drafts of posts I'd never sent. For the first time, I didn't hit submit, not out of agreement, but out of fear. And, if I'm honest, a tiny bit of recognition that the more I clung to my version, the smaller my actual life had become. Update 3. If individual therapy was a controlled burn, family therapy felt like sitting under a spotlight. By the time we reached the first joint session, I'd already done 6 individual ones. Dr. K, our therapist, had circled the same themes over and over: my language, my need for a clear bad guy, the difference between grief and accusation. I hated every minute. I also reluctantly kept going. Session 1 was just Hannah and me. She came in looking composed, not the shattered girl from the hospital, but a grown woman who has had to rebuild herself. Dr. K set ground rules: no interrupting, speak to each other, not just to her, then asked Hannah why she'd agreed to attend. "Because this still runs our lives," Hannah said. "The miscarriage, the lawsuit, what we can and can't say. I don't want my daughter growing up as the audience for the story Mom has made out of that night." I bristled. "So I'm putting on a show now?" Hannah looked me straight in the eye. "You like being the suffering grandmother who stood up for the truth," she said quietly. "It's better than being the woman whose body failed or whose daughter walked away." I get it. But it's poisoning everything. Dr. K asked what I heard in that. I said I heard my daughter calling my grief fake. Hannah immediately said that's not what she meant. We went in circles. Me saying she was minimizing what Maya did, her saying I was minimizing what my words did. Then Dr. K asked me something very pointed. "If you imagine a world where Maya never brought the tea," she said, "but all the medical issues and missed appointments were still there, can you honestly say you know that pregnancy would have ended differently?" I wanted to say yes. I really did. The honest answer, the one that lodged in my throat, was no. Out loud, I managed, I don't like thinking about it that way. Not liking it isn't the same as it not being true, Dr. K said. Hannah watched me, eyes bright. If you admit it might have happened anyway, she said, then you'd have to let go of being the grandmother of a child someone took from you and just be the grandmother of a baby who died. And I don't think you know who you are without that story. I wanted to call that dramatic. Therapy talk. Instead, I sat there feeling uncomfortably seen. The second joint session, weeks later, included Maya. I half expected her to skip it. She didn't. She sat at the far end of the couch, arms folded, polite but distant. Dr. K asked her what she needed. I need my mother to stop telling people I killed a baby, she said evenly. And I need her to stop building her entire identity around that. I snapped again. So now I'm pathetic on top of everything else? I don't think you're pathetic, Maya said. I think you're scared of being small, of being an ordinary woman whose husband died, whose kids moved away, whose life looks like everyone else's. Being the grieving grandmother of a baby you say someone took from you makes you feel like the main character again? The worst part was recognizing myself in that description. Dr. K turned to me. Same question as before, she said. What does that story give you that the more complicated one doesn't? The answers were the same. Certainty, purpose, recognition. They sat heavy in my chest. And what has it cost you? She asked. That list was longer. My authority in the family, my standing at church, easy access to my granddaughter, mutual trust with both daughters. I've lost a lot, I said. It felt like dragging the words through syrup. Maya let out a breath. I have to calculate every time I tell someone where I'm from, whether they've heard your version first, she said. That is what your story has done to me. Hannah added, and I can't trust you to be alone with my daughter, not because you'd hurt her physically, but because I'm not convinced you won't use her as an audience. There wasn't much I could argue with in that moment. For all my insistence that I was just telling the truth, I had ended up in therapy under a court order because I could not stop telling it. I left that session feeling skinned. On the way home, I told myself they were ganging up, that they had both been coached, that no one who hadn't sat in that hospital room had the right to dissect how I survived it. But that night, alone, another thought came. One I would never voice in that room. If I say to myself, plainly, I know Maya didn't single-handedly cause this, then I am no longer the grandmother in a dramatic story. I am simply a grandmother whose first grandchild died because a lot of things went wrong. That version feels unbearably small, and somehow more terrifying than the one where I had someone obvious to point at. Update 4. By the time the 6 months were almost over, I thought I'd learned how to live under all these rules. I went to therapy. I kept my accounts quiet. I edited my own sentences mid-speech. I treated my story about the miscarriage like a restricted substance, not to be handled in public and only with gloves in private. Dr. K sent a mid-course note to the court. My lawyer paraphrased it as, shows insight, still tends to center own experience, progress ongoing. The judge accepted it. No extra penalties. The plan continued. On the surface, life looked better. Hannah relaxed a bit. I got more visits with my granddaughter, still mostly at their place, usually with an adult present, but with less obvious tension. One Sunday, I was allowed to take her to the park alone for 2 hours. I came home almost giddy. Church settled. I stayed in my back row seat. No one asked me to lead anything. People were polite. Some clearly remembered. Others had moved on. I was no longer the main topic, which I suppose is what I claimed to want. Then I slipped. It happened at a family barbecue. My house, my grill, my backyard. Hannah and Mark came with my granddaughter. Maya came too. We talked about school, work, cartoons. For a while, it felt almost normal. My granddaughter, sticky with watermelon, climbed into my lap and asked, Grandma, did you ever have another baby before me? Everything went quiet. My heart pounded. I could feel Hannah watching. I could almost hear Dr. K reciting, simple, honest, age-appropriate. Yes, sweetie, I said carefully. There was a baby before you. Something very sad happened and they didn't get to stay. Her little face went serious. What happened? It was very complicated, I said. Some things with mommy's body and other things. It's not something you need to worry about. You are safe and you are here, and we love you very much. I did not say Maya's name. I did not mention T. I felt like I had walked a tightrope and made it to the other side. Later, in the kitchen, Hannah let me know she did not agree. You can't do that, she said quietly but intensely. Do what? Answer her question, I said. I didn't lie. I didn't blame anyone. You dangled it, she said. You gave her just enough to know there's a big story she isn't getting. You want to be the one she comes to later for the real version. I could see it. We lost a baby, I said. She asked. I'm not going to pretend she didn't exist. You can honor that baby without turning it into your monologue, Hannah said. Until you can prove you won't do that, you don't get unsupervised time. I'm not risking you pulling her into this. Within a week, she texted revised ground rules. For now, visits would be at their house with someone present. No large family gatherings without talking through boundaries ahead of time. No discussing the baby unless she or Mark started the conversation. To me, it felt like being sent back to day one on probation after 23 clean weeks. I complained to Dr. K, of course. I listed everything I had done: therapy, silence, the careful phrasing at the barbecue. I said my daughters were using boundaries as a weapon to keep me at arm's length. She listened and then asked, in that moment with your granddaughter, were you primarily thinking about what she needed to hear or what you needed to say? I was thinking about not lying, I said. You had options between lying and hinting, she said calmly. You chose language that left a door open. That's not neutral. So now I was being critiqued on subtext. Legally, the 6 months ended. The judge accepted Dr. K's final report. The reduced penalty was paid in full. The enforcement matter closed. My lawyer called it the best outcome we could hope for. On paper, I kept my house and avoided harsher sanctions. In practice, my life stayed narrow. Church, errands, scheduled visits, group chats where I stick to photos and recipes. A mind that has learned to slam on the brakes before certain sentences. I have become very good at not saying the thing I still believe. That is the paradox I live with now. I gave up telling my version out loud in exchange for staying in the room at all. I am no longer the loud, wronged grandmother in public. I am the quiet one on the edge of the picture, holding my tongue. Final update, 6 years later. It has been nearly 6 years since that night in the hospital and a little over 3 since the court signed off on my compliance plan. From the outside, my life looks unremarkable. Same small house, same curtains, same shrubs. A woman in her 60s going to church on Sundays, grocery shopping on Tuesdays, watering plants, seeing family when invited. Inside, my life is organized around what is missing. My husband is gone. His chair still sits in the corner. Sometimes, when the light hits it, I still imagine him there asking what's for dinner. The baby we lost has no headstone. There's a box in my bedroom with ultrasound pictures, a hospital bracelet, a sympathy card with a tiny footprint printed on it. I open it rarely. When I do, it feels like handling evidence more than keepsakes. And the version of myself I fought to be, the fierce grandmother defending a stolen grandchild, is something I can now only visit in memory. Here's where everyone stands. Hannah is doing well. A stable job, a modest townhouse with Mark. My granddaughter in grade 2, obsessed with planets and glue-covered crafts. They talk about maybe trying for another baby someday. If they do, I doubt I will be as involved as I once imagined, and that is a consequence I earned. Maya rebuilt her career in her own way. Different program, different path. From what I see in photos, she works in a clinic, wears scrubs, clearly has a life full of other people's children. I only know details through Hannah, who parcels them out carefully. My daughters are close again. They text, visit, lean on each other. When family plans are made, they coordinate with each other first, then let me know what has been decided. I am included, but not central. Hannah calls weekly. We talk about work, recipes, small crises. We do not talk about the lawsuit. We do not dissect the miscarriage. The word T does not pass anyone's lips. Those topics live behind a wall we all see and pretend not to. Maya does not call, but she will speak to me at gatherings. She brings dishes, asks polite questions, opens jars I can't open. Once she put a hand on my elbow when I stumbled getting up the stairs. It was a small gesture, but it stayed with me for days. There are no explosions anymore. No slammed doors, no legal threats, just careful distance and controlled topics. My granddaughter knows there was a baby before her. Hannah and Maya told her together, without me. She knows mommy lost a baby before you and it was very sad. She knows there were problems with mommy's body and other things that made it hard for the baby to stay. She does not know about herbal tea or emails to a dean or court orders. She has never heard that her aunt killed anyone. Sometimes she asks me gentle questions. Grandma, were you there when the baby died? Yes, I say, I was there. Was everyone sad? Yes, I say. Everyone was very sad. Dr. K's voice still lives in my head. Keep it short. Keep it honest. Don't use her as a sounding board. Legally, I am in the clear as long as I behave. The non-disparagement clause is still active. I know every word of it. I will not say Maya caused the miscarriage. I will not say the corrective statement was a lie. I will not frame her as dangerous to patients. If I break that, the judge can sanction me without another long process. At my age, I would not survive losing the house or another full-scale family fracture, so I don't break it. Here is the part I can only admit in a place like this. I know now that Maya did not single-handedly cause the miscarriage. I know the gestational diabetes mattered. I know the missed appointments mattered. I know our own choices, mine, Hannah's, played a role. I know that even if that box of tea had never entered my house, the risk was there. I knew pieces of that before. I just refused to let myself say it outright because it felt like stepping down from a stage where I had gotten used to standing. Calling myself the grandmother of a stolen child made my pain feel larger. People listened. People sympathized. It gave shape and meaning to something that otherwise looked like chaos and bad luck. Letting go of that role has felt, at times, like shrinking. But clinging to it did not give me a bigger life. It hollowed out the one I had. Because of how I chose to tell this story, I now have a daughter who keeps some parts of her life locked away from me, another who deals with me politely but cautiously, a granddaughter whose parents will never hand me the full keys to her world, a church that moved me quietly from center to margin, a house I fought to keep that sometimes feels more like a museum of old versions of me than a home. And the final twist. After all that stubbornness, I am no longer even allowed to play the role I worked so hard to claim. The grandmother of the stolen child exists only in my head now. Out loud, I am the grandmother of a child who died because pregnancy is fragile and life is unfair. So where does that leave me? Most days, it leaves me with ordinary routines and carefully chosen words. I cook, I read, I babysit when invited. I hold my granddaughter's hand and point out birds and clouds and try not to drag her into a story she did not live. On some nights, when the house is quiet, I open the drawer with the court papers and read the sentence I hated most. We were wrong to say that Maya's actions caused the miscarriage. I don't read it now to convince myself it's correct. I read it to remind myself of what I lost by refusing to even consider those words earlier. Trust, ease, authority, and a different version of my later years where I might have been part of my family's healing instead of the reason everyone treads so carefully. I cannot go back and be the mother who held more than one truth from the start. I made the choices I made. This is where they led. Two daughters standing together, a granddaughter protected from my version of events, and me in the back row of my own family story. Watching through glass, I helped install. I helped install.